just want to put this up here. No. Hi. I just wanted to put on the topic of conversation here, but anyhow, it's not coming. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, how are you, Rachel?
Good. Okay. Thanks for having me. Can everyone hear me? You can hear me, right?
I can hear you very well. Thank you so much for your willingness to come and talk about this important conversation.
No problem.
I,
Thanks for initiating.
I know that you're so passionate about it. You're always like writing about it, and it really influenced me in the way that I view things. I'm realizing all the messages that are out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There's there is so much that we are bombarded with, and it's actually interesting because the more you learn about diet culture and the more you read about it, the more you notice how much it's implemented and infiltrated, so much of your life. Like we don't even realize the ways that it shows up, you know? And it's like all we see. Like I know that when I watch TV with my girls, when I read books, when I read my own books, when I read articles, like I see it all the time. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like I kind of like miss those days when I was ignorant, you know, because I get so impassioned about it. But I'm also so glad that I discovered it and that I detached myself from it and that I'm teaching better for my own family, you know?
Yeah. Like watching your stories and seeing everything that you shared really has made me realize, how much it's in showing up in our life and how much I need to do to protect my children or educate them, right? And to make them aware for them to also view and understand and question what they're seeing and know that all these images are not, it's not the truth, right? Bodies aren't made to look that way and it's photoshopped and it's, just different messages that are given that are really a lot of like false stuff around.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's, we're going to talk about that more, but like a lot of what we can do to protect our kids is really just like educating and pointing things out and then kind of teaching them our value system and teaching them what's wrong with what we're seeing here and kind of giving them that like intellectual ammunition. That's the way that we safeguard them. If they see a message and they're like, okay, like we've talked about that. I know that that's wrong and I understand why. And I even know the healthier way to think about this, that is like the greatest thing that we can do to protect our kids from diet culture messages. And I know that parents think like this is something that happens in like the early teen years, but like research shows like kids as young as 3 years old are being influenced by diet culture. So we really need to start very young having these conversations.
That is crazy. I would have never thought. I actually want you to introduce yourself also, Rachel. I just jumped into this. I'm so excited to talk about this, but I want you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Okay. So I am a licensed mental health counselor. I work in the five towns in New York. I work with kids and adults and teenagers, and women with infertility post-hysterectomy. A lot of my work now centers around, I mean, I do a lot of work on diet culture, body image, disordered eating. I do a lot of work with anxiety with kids specifically. That's probably about 95% of the kids that I work with have some kind of issues with anxiety. And then for everyone else, it's kind of like the broad spectrum of things, you know, just life circumstances, divorce, global pandemic, you know, all that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, that's me.
Really nice. So, do you think that, like you just said, that a 3-year-old can really be already affected by this diet culture, which is crazy? Do you think a child would automatically love their body if they weren't sent all these messages? Like, do we love our body naturally as we just age? Does this come naturally to humans to love our body?
So I mean, if you watch kids when they're young, they're just, I wouldn't say that they love their bodies. They're just not focused on them at all. Like they don't view them, they view them as instruments, not ornaments, right? As a vehicle to get around. It's something that helps them run and jump. They're proud of how tall they are. They're proud of how strong they are. Like it's not about aesthetics. It's about what their body can do. Look how high I could jump. Look, I reached the cupboard myself. Like they're so proud of how their body serves them. But then eventually, somewhere along the way, and a lot of it is because of the culture we live in, and sometimes it's even parents not even realizing. And again, that's why the gift of like learning to reject diet culture is so wonderful because you don't do this to your kids. Somewhere along the way, we start emphasizing a lot their physical attributes. You're so pretty, right? Not to say we shouldn't compliment our children and say that to them, you're delicious and I love your eyes and your hair is beautiful. We should. But sometimes we emphasize that too much to the point that they start thinking like that's their worth. Like, oh, it's very important for me to be beautiful, to be thin, to have beautiful straight hair, or to have curly hair, or to have, long eyelashes. Like they start thinking that this is something that they're supposed to have. Or they hear how you talk about someone else's child. Like, oh, she's so tall and thin. And maybe they're not tall and thin, and they're like, oh, should I be tall and thin? Right. So then they start getting these messages that it's not about what their body can do, it's about what their body looks like, and again, it's also outside forces like, teachers might say things or grandparents, and that's kind of when it shifts. So they're not born loving their bodies and loving the way they look, but they are born just understanding that that's a vehicle to do things for them, and they are very proud of themselves. And I think that I'm in general, right? But again, it shifts as they start learning more of what society expects or the messages that they get at home. And we really want to prevent that. We want to teach our kids, yes, your body is a vehicle for doing things. It is amazing. And even when they're a teenager, you can still say those things. Look how tall you're getting. Look how much you're growing. Like, wow, thank you for bringing in all those groceries. Like, holy moly, I didn't realize like you're so strong, like really showing them that you appreciate what their bodies do, and giving them an appreciation for it. So it's very much a matter of like us being aware of the messages that go on around and trying to kind of keep that theme of like it's important what your body can do for you, not how it looks. And that doesn't mean again that we don't care about how we look and they should just like walk around like a schlump. Like we take pride in how we look, but that doesn't mean that you have to be thin or weigh a certain amount or have a certain length of hair or eyelashes or hair color or a certain skin complexion. We take pride in our bodies, meaning that we treat them with respect, and we always put ourselves together in a way that makes us feel empowered and good about ourselves, good in our skin. And we get to decide what we think is beautiful and what we think looks good. We don't have to listen to what other people say, you know? So
Yeah,
that's what we want to give our kids.
exactly. It's what's beautiful in our eyes, not
Yes.
society's eyes.
Yeah.
That distinction. And when you were saying to tell a child, "Oh, you're so pretty, you're so cute," I really try my best not to tell my child, "Oh, you look so cute, you look so pretty," just when they put on a fancy little dress or a bow in their hair, right? If it's something that I find in them, I will always say it, and not just like, because then I feel like they're going to feel like that dress made me pretty or this bow makes me pretty. My mother only says how cute I look when I'm dressed this way. So I kind of like to just do it in general, even in pajamas and even when they're playing in the sand and the mud, like not to make it to linked with anything that they put on. So now, oh, look how cute you look.
Right. Yeah. And I would say even in those circumstances, you could kind of highlight if they're putting on something special instead of being like, wow, you're extra pretty. It's just, wow, this is like such a special occasion. Look at this. You could even focus on the dress. This beautiful dress is for such a special occasion. Again, it's not about them, it's about the dress. And we understand that it's a special time. And you know what I mean? Or the flowers in the hair are like, wow, for the wedding, we can emphasize more the time instead of like their physical aesthetic.
Yeah,
But it's a balance again of like, of course our kids should know that we think that they're delicious and beautiful and adorable and sweet, but they also need to know that we think that they're kind and smart and funny and a joy to be around, and that they teach you things, and that when they come in the door, like your day feels like so exciting because now you can hear about their day. Like those are the things that build them up and that last.
exactly. That there's more than their exterior appearance is the message we want them to know.
Yeah. And we want them to see that in other people also, right? That's what matters in a person, not how they look, who they are. you know?
Yeah.
And the way we teach that again is how we interact with them.
Yeah. So, for example, if a child, if a parent has a child that is fat, or, I also want you to explain to us, is it okay to use such terms? Fat or bigger body.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts around these terms? Should we use them? Is it negative, positive?
So there's like differing opinions. But overall, the fat community, like people who exist in bigger bodies or are fat, say fat should not be a bad word. And even kind of advocate that you should teach your kids that fat is not an insult, right? We don't call people fat to hurt their feelings. Everybody has fat. Some people are more fat, some people are less fat. It's not a bad thing. Fat feeds your cells, fat keeps you warm. It's just a part of being a human being. And it's so interesting that when they're little and they're babies. We love chubby, fat babies. And it's a compliment. Oh, she's so chubby. She's huge. She's delicious. We want to eat their rolls and pinch them. Somewhere along the line, like we decide that being fat isn't cute anymore and it's not a good thing. So when you call a baby fat, that's not an insult. Yum, delish. You want to eat them alive. But like an 8-year-old to be called fat, the parents are like, oh my God, like, no, 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 right? So we want to kind of take away the negative connotation of fat. And again, the rest of the world still sees fat as a negative word. But if you can teach your kids, you know what, people try to make it that fat is a bad thing. They try to use it as an insult, but it's not an insult. The fact is that people have fat on their bodies and it's a good thing. So when they're saying that, they're trying to hurt your feelings, but you don't have to let them. Yeah, I have fat. Great. It's a good thing. Thank God. So we want to take the stigma out of that. But then, there are people that say that they don't like that. So you can also say a bigger body,
Okay.
which is also just a very neutral term. And it's just the reality. She has bigger feet, she has longer hair, she's taller, she's shorter, bigger body, also very neutral. But it's important that we also realize, like when people say overweight, my child is overweight, or even obese, those are very stigmatizing words. Overweight is a problem because overweight kind of like indicates or is it's speculating that there's like an ideal weight to be. So what is that ideal weight? Over what weight? We're not all supposed to weigh the same amount. There's no like middle of the road weight that we're all supposed to be at. There's so many different weights that people can be at and look healthy. And there can be someone who weighs X pounds and someone else who weighs the same X pounds, but they look completely different because of their body composition, because of their height, because of muscle mass. There's so many different things. So overweight is very stigmatizing and it doesn't tell us anything other than, that we're saying there's an ideal weight. And saying obese is definitely a stigmatizing word because that word itself means having eaten until fat. So when you're calling someone obese, that is stigmatizing because then we're saying, oh, you look that way because you just don't stop eating, right? And that's language that was created by people who use the BMI charts, which again is a whole other issue that we could get into if we have time. But obese is a really terrible word. And that's why sometimes you'll see when health advocates kind of story about obesity, they'll like put a star so that they don't have the whole word there because they don't want to offend people and hurt people's feelings. It's insulting to tell someone that they're obese. And we know that obesity is not even a real thing. Again, it's based on BMI charts, which are completely arbitrary and don't tell us anything about a person's body composition, about their health or anything. So we want to kind of ignore that. So language is really important, especially also when we talk to our kids, when we take them to the doctor, when we talk about other bodies, when we talk about our own bodies. So overweight and obese should be things that we take out of our our
Okay.
dictionary, our vocabulary. And it's hard. Sometimes like you'll find that you'll say those words and then you'll be like, oh shoot, like I'm not supposed to say that. And that's okay. You can remind yourself like, you know what? No, not overweight, bigger body, not obese, bigger body, like we just don't say, or fat, again, whichever word you choose. But those two words are highly stigmatizing and hurtful, you
Yeah.
know? Again, they don't tell us anything about a person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of this idea of the association of a child that's healthy isn't overweight, like health. And I know that you were sharing a lot about that at one point, and I was like, that is so true. Health is one thing, and then the size of your body is another thing. And
yeah.
so, for example, a parent has a child and they're realizing that maybe the child is not listening to their hunger cues. Could it be that a child that doesn't listen to their hunger cues, could it be because of unresolved emotions or a traumatic experience? Could it be linked that a child is basically, like they say, eating their emotions? Is that something that a parent should look into?
So it's definitely possible that that is going on. Definitely, like if there was a feeling of deprivation for a child during infancy, meaning a lot of the time, and again, like there's zero judgment here, and I'm going to tread very carefully when I bring this up, but um, parents who try to like put their babies on feeding schedules, they have some research that shows that if you're not feeding on demand and you're trying to make your baby eat every 2 hours, then that tends to create feelings of deprivation that could lead into problems when the child is older, because of this
That
like.
so that would be considered the first point in time where you're telling the child, don't listen to your hunger cues. I know better than you.
Yeah, and I'll feed you when it's time. It's too, and we see that sometimes. I just fed them. How are they hungry again? What? It's not 2 hours. So that's why they say like feeding on demand is really important because you're honoring your child's hunger cues and you're helping them regulate their hunger cues and their you know their their feeding schedules themselves. We want to give them that autonomy, and it helps them to develop a healthier relationship with food and their hunger as they're older because they learn to listen to those cues and trust them. So again, no judgment. People that create feeding schedules, that they feed every 2 hours or whatever it is, we're not judging, but there is that research out there that shows that feeding on demand is really important for a child, a baby, in order to learn to regulate their needs, in terms of feeding when they're older. Also baby-led weaning, right? That's like a big movement also of just like letting your kids kind of figure out like how to feed themselves and what to eat and what they like and playing with textures and that kind of stuff. Um, Also, kids who've had like medical problems or any kind of trauma with feeding, that can also disconnect their innate eating instinct. So if your child was on a feeding tube when they were young or had maybe feeding problems of some sort, like that can also disrupt it. If you have a toddler who you like persuaded to eat more when they were not hungry, and we all do that, like we've all been guilty of it. You didn't eat enough. You have to have more chicken. If you want dessert, you have to eat this. So then again, we're kind of teaching them to disconnect from their hunger cues and listen to what we tell them. A parent, did I eat enough? Did I eat enough? Am I done? And again, I'm speaking from my own experience. Like I always say like my firstborn was like, she was like the carbon. She was the sacrifice because all the mistakes we made on her, and I learned. But she would always say, am I done? And I would tell her when she's done, no, you didn't eat. You have to have more before you could leave the table. So once we learned this intuitive eating model, this division of responsibility, which I'll talk a little bit more about soon, we stopped, like, I would say, do you feel like you had enough? Are you done? And the first time I asked her that, she was like, wait, what? You're supposed to tell me I'm done. Why are you asking me? Like, she didn't even know. She's like, I don't know, like you tell me if I had enough. So when I gave her that autonomy again, she was like, oh, and then she was able to listen to herself. So if we give them that consistency, we let them build that trust, we let them listen to themselves. Kids are self-regulating. They can. We don't give them enough credit. We think that we're supposed to tell them what to do and that's how they figure it out. No, kids have that innate ability,
Yeah.
right? But I think sometimes parents are over controlling and under supportive. So if we kind of just let go and trust them and we say, and that's what the division of responsibility is by Ellen Satter. She's a feeding therapist. She says, parents, you get to decide what the meals are and the meal times, right? So you decide when breakfast is, lunch, dinner, snacks. You decide what you serve, and then they get to decide what they eat, how much they eat, and that's it. If they decide not to eat, then that's their choice. And you say, okay, no problem, but just know that the next time that we eat is going to be at 3 o'clock snack time, right? And then we kind of stick to that. And again, that schedule helps them regulate their eating schedule more, because you don't want them grazing all day, because that is actually not good for their health for them to be grazing all day, because then they can't really listen to their hunger cues. This way we kind of regulate their eating schedule and they're more innately connected to their eating. So we want to give them that consistency, that trust. And again, that radiates in so many different ways because we're teaching our kids, you can trust your feelings. You can trust your gut. You have autonomy over your own body. You have these boundaries, and you give consent to other people in terms of like what you are willing to do at your mealtime. Like, I'm done, I don't want anymore, you can push the plate away. That's totally up to you. Like, yes, you can do that. We give them that that um confidence to be able to say, like, you know what, I had enough, like, I'm good now. And that they can trust those innate feelings, and that's so important for them, for their safety, for their relationships, for anything in life, to know, like, this is how I'm feeling right now, I'm going to listen to it, and I'm not going to let someone else's voice override what I'm feeling right now. And we want that for them. We don't want external voices telling them what to do. We want them to be able to trust themselves, and we want that, we hope that it aligns with our values. But again, if our values are, boundaries, consent, autonomy, respect, you know,
Yeah.
then we're teaching that by example, and it's so with something so simple as feeding, but we don't realize that it spreads out in so many different ways.
Yes, for sure. And and dinner becomes a lot more pleasant. We don't have to, tell them, finish, finish, finish. And also it reminded me when you were saying how, you're telling your toddler, eat, eat, eat. We often don't realize how little food their body needs. We have like this expectation of so much, but they're small bodies, they don't need that much. And when they feel full, it's faster than what we expect, oftentimes.
Yes, there's an amazing account that I follow, and I'm sure a lot of you follow it. If not, you should follow it. It's called Kids Eat in Color.
Yes, I
Jennifer
love it.
Aniston. She's amazing. And she did a post once a while back where she showed how many strawberries a 4-year-old needs to get their fill of vitamin C. And it was 2 strawberries for their daily fill of vitamin C. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was so eye-opening. And she'll do that all the time. She'll show what kids need in terms of portions to fill like their vitamin requirements. It's nothing. And she'll do a side by side what we think our kids need and what they actually need. So a lot of the time we don't know their nutritional needs. We just assume because we're, basing it on like what we would eat or what we think is adequate, but like their stomachs are tiny and their nutritional needs are tiny as when they're little. And as they grow, obviously those things expand. But again, like if you give them, 5 strawberries and they only eat two, trust that your child knows. And again, if you set it up that is something that you always do in your home, even if you start changing it now. Again, like I didn't do this with my first until much later on. She was probably 8 years old when we started this model. So we really had done a lot of the damage already. But I see that it shifted with her. And just in terms of even the things she eats, like it was literally a battle to get her to put a vegetable in her mouth. Always like choking things down. I remember like the torture that dinner time was. Now because she listens to her body, and that's why there's all this pushback against intuitive eating. What does that mean? You could just eat whatever you want, you're going to eat donuts all the time and chips all the time. Like, if you give yourself unconditional permission to eat, you give yourself the gift of being able to truly listen to what your body needs. And yes, sometimes your body wants chips and donuts, but most of the time it wants the things that give you energy and fuel you and give you nutrients. So you'll want the vegetables and the fruit. You'll want the salads. You'll want the pasta with the carbs that makes you feel good, but you won't maybe necessarily want a heavy creamy sauce on it all the time. Maybe once in a while, because it doesn't always make you feel good. You'll want to drink more water. You'll want to sleep more. When you take better care of your body from a place of love and respect, it's just so much more natural, and you can really truly listen to what your body wants as opposed to a place from fear.
Yeah.
So we really have to like kind of give ourselves permission to say like it's never too late to start over. And I think that goes for anything in parenting. When I'm sure when people learn things from you, they're like, oh my gosh, I really messed it up, Sterna. Like, what am I going to do? And I always say, like, you can always start again. You can always start anew and tell your kids, like, you know what? Like, I'm learning all these new things, and I didn't realize like how wrong I had it. And I want to try this now because I think this will be better for us as a family. And I think that's such a wonderful example to our kids also of it's never too late to do the right thing. We don't have to stay stuck in our ways because it's what I've always done. No, I can learn better and I can do better now. It's never too late to make a change.
And that really models growth, saying, I learned better and now I want to change this.
Yeah, yeah,
It is just, I never had any issues around dinner time in my home. And I because I've always just put the food. I always trusted my kids would eat what I never worried that my kids would be hungry, or because I figured if they're hungry, they're going to eat. You know, there's food, they're going to eat it. And I often sometimes my heart would go out to parents that would tell me that, you know, dinner is such a struggle and my kid doesn't want to sit and eat. And really we have to just let it go and really enjoy this dinner time together with our family. And instead of focusing on, you know, finish your plate, you can focus on discussing about your day and enjoying the company that, you know, we are at the table together and having a conversation, you know,
Yeah.
rather than finish your plate.
Right. And you can even talk about what is at the table. You could say like, "Oh, what do you think of the fish this week? Do you like it?" Like, "Oh, what do you aren't the vegetables so good?" Like, you can even talk about that and let them that actually also connects them to like think about, to be more mindful eaters, to think about like, "Oh, do I like this? Yeah, this is pretty good. Oh, you know what? Don't make this again. I don't love it." Like, let them have a say also in meal times in the kitchen, in meal prep. Let them make a menu with you of the stuff that they love to eat. Like this way there's just less resistance. And again, it's teaching them like eating is like a form of self-care. It's a joyful, pleasurable thing. It's bonding, it's family time, it's sitting at the table without our phones, put the phones away, no technology at the table. This is so important, not just for intuitive eating and mindful eating, but for bonding and relationships. Like this is such an important time to be present with your kids. And it doesn't matter if someone's working and not home. Like if you're home with your kids, like you can sit at the table with them and talk. You don't have to be like, standing at the stove or on your phone. Sit down and talk with them. And again, no technology at the table. Like really important. These are crucial times. We know that food is so much more than nutrients. It is about connection. It's about memories. It's about
Exactly.
socializing. So we want to show them that it's not just about like it's dinner time. It's let's make something that's delicious and that we all enjoy and that we made together. Doesn't have to be like that. That's not always practical. But again, food is about so much more than that, you know?
So I just want to sum up your answer, because the question back to a child that is in a bigger body. If a parent wants to, maybe see if they're ignoring their hunger cues, basically to look at how they're handling dinner time in their home. And you're saying also maybe to look at if they've experienced, so for example, if a child experienced um, scheduled feeding as a child, then it would be to really implement more on, are you feeling hungry right now? Did you have enough? Like trying to get the child to listen to their body, really.
Yeah. To bring them back. And again, to give them that like trust to say like, okay, let's start listening to our body. Let's teach them those mindfulness cues. Did you have enough? How does that taste? Do you want more? Do you want something crunchy? Do you want something sweet? And in there's a book by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch, who are both dietitians, and they're kind of like the founders of intuitive eating. Not founders of intuitive eating because we are all born intuitive eaters, but intuitive eating as a model of a way to improve your relationship with food in your body. So their book, they talk about kind of like how to feel your fullness, how to know if you're satisfied. So it's a great book, and they have a whole chapter on raising intuitive eaters. It's a great book to look at for yourself and your kids, so that if you see that your child is having trouble listening to their cues, I would want to make sure there's no medical issues that are causing that. So I would, want to rule that out. And B, I would want to make sure that there's no restriction going on of any kind. So if in your home you're restricting certain foods, or not allowing a certain food at all, meaning not just like, oh, you can only have it at X, once a week or whatever, but that you're saying we don't have candy in this home, or we don't have chips. Like you want to look at that. And I've had parents who have told me, and I've actually had teachers tell me like there's certain kids who like their parents don't allow candy in the home, and they're picking candy out of the garbage at school,
Wow.
off of the floor, like really not okay. And that's tragic. So we want to give our kids access to these foods and show them it's not good or bad. These are play foods. These are foods that we can have sometimes, just like there's a time for recess and there's a time for parties and there's a time for, but then there's also a time for sitting down and learning, and a time for being a little bit more serious and, sitting with a little bit more self-control. Like it's the same thing. There's a time for, having more nutritious foods, and, so we don't eat licorice for dinner, we have meal foods, but there's also a time that we can have that. And like nothing's off the table. There's no good or bad. So I would say if you see that your child's really having trouble, be honest with yourself. Like, do they feel deprived? Do they feel like they can't have that stuff? And as your child gets older, also just know that if you don't have it in your house, their friends have it in their house and they're going to eat it there, or they'll find ways to get it. And again, I've had parents who come to me with empty, Ziploc bags of empty candy wrappers that they found under their kid's mattress. Like, we don't want to create a child who is sneak eating and binging. This is destroying their relationship with food. It's destroying their mental health. It's destroying their bodies, you know? They're eating more candy than they should be. If we would just give it to them, we'd just be so uninteresting to them. It would be something they want occasionally, and that's it. Like, you don't see kids binging carrots and broccoli because that's something they always have access to. But we see kids and adults binging sugar and ice cream and whatever. And again, it's not an addiction, it's because of restriction. So look at that. I would rule out medical, look at, are we restricting? And then maybe try again those exercises in the intuitive eating book to connect them back to their hunger and fullness cues, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So, if, for example, a parent would bring a child shopping, I know that, especially kids that are going into puberty, right? Their body's changing a lot. So maybe they're always used to just fitting into their clothing, and suddenly they're in the store taking their size and it's fitting tighter. They don't like how they fit, or they can no longer fit in that child section. They have to go to the smallest size for women. And then they're starting to feel, I can't fit into clothes that I like. So how to go about that for parents with children in bigger bodies going shopping and all of that.
Right. So unfortunately, we really don't have size inclusive brands, not just for adults, but for kids also. It's very like straight size, super
Yeah.
skinny, like we're not size inclusive. So I would say the first thing is, like, if you know that your child's in a bigger body, try to find stores and clothing brands that do accommodate their bodies, that do, fit them properly and comfortably. And that way you kind of like avoid that shaming moment. But if you do get caught in that shaming moment, your child is going to be looking to you to see how your face is registering that experience, right? So they might feel super shameful and really like upset. And if you're kind of with them in it and you're like, your button isn't closing, that just compounds it. So if you say, oh my gosh, like, you're growing, this is amazing, I'm so proud of you, like, this is what your body is supposed to do, you're supposed to grow. And you know what, this stinking shirt, like, what's wrong with the shirt? There's nothing wrong with your body. Why are
Exactly.
they making such a tiny shirt? I'm going to speak to them and tell them they should have better sizing, that it should fit all bodies. We want to let them know that they don't need to change their body to fit into the clothes. The clothes need to change to fit their bodies. We're not all supposed to shrink so that we can be the size of the clothing. We want them to know that it's not a problem with them. It's a problem with the clothing. It's a problem with the manufacturer, that they're not thinking that kids are diverse. And we want to let them know that we're not ashamed of them. They might feel ashamed, but we're not. So you could validate them. Like, I know you feel bad, but I don't feel bad about how you look. I'm so glad that you're healthy and you're growing. And health is not about whether or not your shirt fits you. It's about how you feel, and do you feel loved, and do you have friends, and do you sleep well, and do you run around, and are you part of a community, and do you feel like, Hashem loves you, like, whatever it is. We give them those messages, that health is not what you eat and how you look. Those are two like teeny tiny parts of our health, what we eat and I wouldn't even say how we look, how we feel, right? The rest is, there's so many different components to health. But again, diet culture kind of sizes it down to, how skinny are you? How little do you weigh? And what do you eat? Do you eat salad, or do you eat potato chips? Well, if you eat potato chips, you're not healthy. So we want to teach them it doesn't matter. So in those moments, it's really important that we kind of be, again, validating. You don't want to be like, what are you crying about? Like, love yourself. You're not fat, like, don't say that. And again, not saying you're not fat is emphasizing that there's something wrong with being fat. So there's nothing wrong with how you look. I'm annoyed that this clothing store can't accommodate us. Let's go somewhere else. No biggie, you know? And you hug them and you love them and you're perfect the way you are. That's the message they want to hear. Just like when a kid comes home with a bad test grade, we have two options. We can shame them. What's wrong with you? Why don't you study? You don't try hard enough. Or we can be totally non-judgmental, even if we know they didn't study hard enough. they know they didn't either. They know why they got that grade. They're not dumb, you know? So even if they didn't study hard enough, or if they did study hard enough and they still got that bad grade, shaming them isn't helpful. That's a wonderful opportunity for connection with your child and to tell them, you know what, unconditional, it doesn't matter. The grade is so not important. And you know what? So this is one rough spot, a bad grade. And yeah, maybe you didn't give it your all, but you can give it your all next time. You know, I know you can do better. And let's figure out what we can do to help you do better. It's okay. You know, those are like super important opportunities to like build our kids up so that they do better the next time, you know, and that's what we want to do for our kids. Those moments are so fragile. We can either like tear them down and create this horrible, you know, relationship with their bodies, or we can build them up and make them feel loved and emphasize again, it doesn't matter what you look like. That is the least important part of who you are, you know? Like, let's get out of this stinking store, you know? Um, it's a really important like bonding moment for you guys and a relationship building moment. So,
I think it's beautiful what you're saying, because in all other relationships, like I always say this, is that there's lots of conditions, right? Like in school, you have to be the cool kid to be part of this clique, you know, and you have to look this way to be, and like the one place where really they should feel unconditional love is with us, right? Is with their parents. They really should feel like I'm accepting you and there is nothing wrong with you. And you are
yeah,
perfect the way that you are created. You are perfect that way. And what I find sad also is that sometimes parents can use the sizing in stores to prove their point. You know what I mean? Like you have to lose weight. You don't even fit into your size. You know, like that kind
right.
of backs up that what their parents are telling children, which can be so hurtful, so
That
hurtful.
I always say, like, if you take your kid to the shoe store and most kids their age wear a size 8 shoe and they wear a size 10 shoe, are we like, why don't you have smaller feet? We're usually like, wow, the kid has huge feet. Whoa, you know, and we get them a bigger size. We don't make a big deal out of it. But
Exactly.
why do we make such a big deal when they're wearing a bigger shirt size or a bigger pant size or, you know, that we're not accepting. You can have big feet, you know, you can have big hands, you know, you can have broad shoulders, you can't be fat. You need to fit into the eight, you know, the 5T or the eight, the 7-8, or like, God forbid that they should, you know. So
Yeah.
we really have to put it in perspective. Like, body size is the same as height, shoe size. Like, it's all predetermined by our genetics. Some of our behaviors influence it to some degree, but it's so much more complex than that. And we have to accept that. And especially, you know, I see this a lot with parents who their children are built like them. And sometimes I wonder, like, do you see yourself in a mirror? Like, your child looks like you. Why are you getting upset that they're not thin enough, that they're too fat, that they're, you know, awkward or whatever? Like, there are genetics at play here. Your child looks like you are there as a child, and think about what it was like for you. And again, sometimes that is the root of the problem, that they are thinking about it, what it was like for them. But that didn't work for you to shame you. That didn't work for you to tell you to change your body. You haven't successfully changed it until now. Why not just accept it? And why not teach them to accept it? You know? And again, parents who pressure their children to lose weight or put them on diets actually ends up putting them at higher weights than if they would just let them learn to listen to their bodies and just do what they need to. Um, you know, not to say that being at a higher weight is a terrible thing, but if your goal is to try to make your child smaller and not be fat, it's counterproductive. You're making them bigger than they would be if you would just let them be, you know, and
Exactly.
there's a lot of research on that too. Like that, it's there. So it's really about acceptance, accepting our children, you know. And again, this, I'm sure you see this a lot also. It's not just accepting their body size, accepting their personalities. If they're shy, if they're loud, if they're energetic, if they're, you know, more like reserved, accept them as they are and just see that this is like a wonderful quality that if I channel it the right way and I show them that like I love them unconditionally, even if they're not, I'm super outgoing and my kid is super reserved, it's okay. I don't have to make them outgoing, you know?
Exactly.
It's really important for us to just accept the child we have. Don't try to like create the child that we want, you know?
Exactly. So, like, sometimes, you know, I shared a story once before this live. My little daughter, my eldest, when she was 4 years old, she was eating rice cakes. And this at a birthday party with like a bunch of treats and donuts and all sorts of like different candies. And a lady, an older lady, came to see my daughter, and she told my daughter in front of me, "Oh wow, that is amazing! You're eating rice cakes. Good, you're gonna stay skinny." And
Mm,
I really froze, and I couldn't believe that this lady said that to my little 4-year-old. Like, leave a little kid alone, you know, like you might feel like you want to eat rice cakes because you don't want to gain weight or I don't know what. But like, oh my gosh, you're saying that to a 4-year-old? And that is actually when I started realizing, like, oh my gosh, I don't want this for my children. I don't want them to feel afraid of their body becoming a certain size or them not loving themselves the way they are. And
yeah.
now when somebody tells that to my kid, like, you know, I'm going to say, please respect the fact that I don't talk to my body, my daughter, about our bodies that way. You know, we love our body for all that it does, but I get worried sometimes about what would my child say, like, if I'm not around, right? Like, I want to empower my child to
Yeah.
answer and to reply if a friend in school says, hey, you know, you're so skinny, or hey, you know, you're so fat, or we don't want to play with her, she's fat. Like, what would be your advice for parents to empower the child to answer back?
So we have to give them the answers, the tools to have that proper response. So some of it will be modeling, right? So if your mother-in-law or, someone at a party says like, oh, should he really be eating that? Or, oh, that's not
Yeah.
very healthy. You say, he can decide what to eat. Thanks so much. Or like you said, we don't talk about bodies. Or, hey, like what kind of changing the subject. You know what? She's actually the head of art this year at, school. She's super creative. Or you can just like change the subject completely, and like not acknowledge what they said. And we can use all kinds of like different answers to kind of either end the conversation in its tracks and let them know like you can't talk to me that way, or change the subject. And I would say for kids, like you tell them, and I have this conversation with my kids all the time. If someone talks about your body, you can just say like, please don't talk about my body. It makes me uncomfortable. And you're allowed to say that. Nobody's allowed to say you're so skinny, you're so fat, And if they hear their friends talking about it, and this is really important for like preteen girls and boys, boys have a lot of body image issues too, and we don't talk about it because we think that this is not a male issue. It very much is. And I see a lot of boys in my office that don't want to take off their shirt at the swimming pool, that are super self-conscious because, when they go shopping, for Erev Yontif before a holiday, the skinny pants don't fit them, because again, they're made for a certain body type. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that also with boys. So we shouldn't think this is a girls issue only. It is a lot more prevalent with girls, but we teach girls, if you hear your friends talking about, tell them, guys, like, this is like the least important thing about you, like, we don't need to talk about it. And it's funny because my daughter, she was in sleepaway camp a few years ago, my oldest, and she said everyone in the bunk was like on a diet. And at the time she was 11.
That's crazy.
And
Oh my.
yeah, and she's like, nobody wanted to go to canteen. They were all like, and she, with all her snacks, she'd be like, oh, you guys want Oreos? And they're like, I can't eat that. I'm fat. I'm fat. And fine. And she said she would go around. The counselor said they're like, you could tell her mom is a therapist because she would go around and she'd be like, guys, you're beautiful. You're enjoy life. You're so much more than that. Food is something that makes you happy. Like you don't have to worry about this. Like you're young. It's energy. It's good for you. Like she was like ramming everyone up and like telling them like, don't talk like that about yourself. But she was so sad. Like she wrote a letter home to me about how sad it was for her. Yeah. So just teaching our kids even to encourage their friends, like, don't talk about yourself like that, like, why are you saying you can't eat that? Of course you can. And why are you telling yourself you're fat like it's a bad thing? Like, you look exactly the way you're supposed to look, like, don't say that about yourself as if it's like a negative thing. Like, give them the tools to even, again, it's planting a seed in their friend's head. It doesn't mean things will change because maybe the message they get at home is very different. But just that they're putting it out there that like, hey, like you could respect yourself and you don't have to talk badly about yourself or you don't have to restrict yourself. And certainly don't talk about me, like, so please don't comment on my body. Don't talk about what I eat, makes me uncomfortable. If someone's like, oh, you're allowed to eat that, carbs are bad. Again, something that I hear a lot of 14-year-olds saying, carbs are bad. Like, no, all food's fit. All food is healthy, like, I don't say food good or bad, every food has a time or place. So again, and the more we implement that in the home and the more that it's kind of the culture of our home, the more confidence they'll have to say it to their friends. Like it won't even be a second thought, just like if they hear their friends say, oh, she's so stupid, they'll be like, hey, whoa, like don't say that, that's not nice. Like Why are you calling her names? Like they'll stand up for their friend. Um, so if they're talking about foods are bad and I need to be on a diet, they'll say like, you don't need to be on a diet. You're 12 years old. It's bad for your body to be on a diet. Um, so I have that. I have my 14-year-old is like lecturing friends all over about, diets and the danger. But, again, that's become the culture in our home that like that's not something we do. Uh,
It really is a danger. Even from my experience, I'll share here. When I was a young child, I received the message that at a certain age, especially after puberty, that my body was bigger than what it was supposed to be. And for example, at dinner, and it wasn't like something that was often told to me, maybe like two times, like, and that already had a huge impact on me. Oh, don't eat too much of that. That's going to make you bigger, something like that. And it really stuck with me. And then going to school and seeing my friends also talking about their bodies at 14, 15, everybody was on some sort of diet. And I felt like, oh, my body's bigger. And I remember one day passing by this health food store and they were saying like these pills to lose weight. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I should go get those. And I
right.
was really like, I really wanted to. And then I remember hearing later on in my life, like some people really like even passed away from taking these pills. Like there's like major health issues. And like we really want our children to stay safe, to love themselves. Like we don't know how far this can go.
Yeah. And we're hearing a lot about it now. Also, like there's like a big diet out there now that people are talking about all of the crazy health problems that they've had from using their products, like GI issues, fertility issues, like all kinds of crazy stuff, all in the pursuit of weight loss. Like, why? Why? We know that it's not even sustainable for 95% of people. Like, it's dangerous for you, for your mental health, for your body. Like, we are just better off just really, again, taking care of our health in ways that have nothing to do with trying to make our bodies smaller. And again, for so many people, that's not even possible to be smaller. So you and I can eat the same thing and we will not look the same way because we're just not made of the same cloth. Like we have different genetics and different backgrounds and different DNA and different makeup. Like we won't look the same. So we can share the same exact meal plan and it will not work. And I remember when I was in that dieting phase, I gave my diet plan to a friend and she's like, why isn't it working? And I was like, I don't know. But now that I know, I'm like, hello, because like she cannot eat the same way as me and think that she's going to look the same way as me. We are just going to look different because that is our bodies respond differently. Our bodies hold fat differently. They hold it in different places. We gain weight in different places. We lose weight in different places. Like our bodies are built differently. So when you follow that influencer or whatever that's like, eat what I eat and you're going to look like me. Like, no, you're not. You're never going to. And you're just better off. Again, not to say that you're never going to feel like you want to lose weight or change your body, or if you do feel that way, that there's something wrong with you, or if your daughter feels that way, or son feels that way, that there's something wrong with them. Of course, they're going to feel that way. We live in a world where that is what we hear all the time. So we shouldn't shame them. Oh, why do you want to be in a diet that's dangerous? Diet culture. I totally get it. This is what we hear all the time too. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I get that's the message that we're hearing all the time, but we don't have to change our bodies. You know, there's a culture out there that wants us to think there's something wrong with us and that we need to fix ourselves by buying their products. But that's not true. We don't have to do that. We have to just accept ourselves and take care of ourselves and respect ourselves. And we don't need to buy what they're selling to do that. That's an internal job. It's from here and it's here. It's not with a bar, it's not with a shake, it's not with a gym program. It's none of that. It comes from like your community and who and how you feel inside. Body image is a psychological component, right? That's a psychological work. It's not physical. So we want to teach them that this is all internal. And again, we want to be the role models. And that's actually one of the questions that we had down here. Like, if this is something you struggle with, or can you give this to your kids? And I say absolutely yes. I know sometimes we say like we have to be a certain way in order to give our kids certain things. And I think in most cases, yes. In this case though, I think that you can say to your child, you know what, I'm learning about this and I'm learning how I got these really like mixed up messages when I was growing up about how I should feel about food and my body. And I don't want to believe those anymore. And I'm reading about it and I'm learning. And so I'm going to teach you as I go all the things that I learned because I want to really know what health is. And up until now, I haven't really known it. And again, that teaches your kids, like, again, an important message of like, we can get things wrong. and then we can make it right, you know, and learn together, depending on their age, also learning together with them, reading the books with them. And there's great books about body image and diet culture for kids and for teens and for adults. So you can get all that stuff in your home and, you know, getting diverse toys, like diverse, thank God now, Barbie, they have a little bit of a way to go, but Barbie has very diverse Barbies. They have vitiligo Barbie, they have bigger Barbie, they have, you know, taller Barbie, they have shorter Barbie, they have wider Barbie, they have all different kinds of, you know, different diverse looking Barbies that show kids like you don't look one way. Everybody looks different and everybody is special in their own way, and we respect diversity. And diverse bodies are a good thing. Not everyone is like a skinny person in a fat body, you know?
Yeah. I think
Um,
also a lot of parents, especially mothers, who are pregnant and then give birth and their body's changing. So there's
yeah,
a, unlearning, and also to remind ourselves all the good that our body has created, right? All it's so sad to see so many moms after birth, are so caught up with their body and
yes,
forget like how miraculous their body created a human, how grateful we should be. And, even if our body has changed, like to really realize that. And we're so caught up in the diet culture that it's like, when am I going to bounce back? And when am I going to be?
and bodies are supposed to change. That's something we're supposed to think about too. Like your body shouldn't look the same at 40 as it did when you were 20. You have different energy needs, like especially if you're a mom now. Like you need more energy to be able to care for yourself and your family and to work your job. So your body is going to look different. You are going to have more fat on your body in different places. And that's not a bad thing. But again, we have a culture of saddlebags, abs, get rid of that cellulite, like as if these are flaws on a human body. But this is how human bodies are supposed to look. You are supposed to change, and your weight is supposed to shift, and your shape is supposed to change. And that's not a bad thing. But again, we're taught that we're supposed to look like one way our entire lives, and like we have to fight nature to stay that way. Starve yourself, exercise incessantly, do whatever, have shakes and this juice and that juice and these pills. And but like, why can't we just say this is our bodies are supposed to change? Just like we don't stay like that chubby little baby forever. We grow into a toddler. We grow into, a kid, a teen, an adult. Like our bodies change. Why do we suddenly think that we're supposed to stay the same way from X years to X years? Like we also know, again, more studies, and I'm happy to link them all and share them. I have a lot of them in my highlights on my page. Studies show that being at a higher body weight when you're older is actually something that helps you live longer for the sick. But if you have more fat on your body and you fall, it cushions it. So
Right.
the damage to your body is not as bad. And we know that there's actually fewer complications from in older people who have higher body weight. So it serves a protective factor. But again, we're taught no, obesity is a killer, being fat is a killer, that you're at risk for more health issues if you're in a bigger body. And that's not necessarily true. Again, there's so much at play that comes into health risks. And instead of looking at a person's body, we have to look at so many other things to determine what could be causing health problems. So we want to really be an advocate for our child in the doctor's office, at school, in the home, with in-law family and cousins and whatever. We want to teach them that like we think that weight stigma and fat phobia and diet culture is completely unacceptable. We understand that we live in a world that is very much entrenched in it, but we accept those messages and those goals. We can reject them and we can create our own value system and stick to it, And again, I think that's a wonderful lesson for your child about like not just accepting toxic messages and not just accepting like, oh, this is the way of the world. Oh, well, like, no, you can be the person that changes it. You can do better and do different. You're one person, but you have so much influence and you have so much impact in this world. You can do better for yourself. And it doesn't matter if other people don't go along with you. And that's something hard. That's something that I really struggle with. I often like will text my friends, like, please remind me it's not my job to save everyone from diet culture. Because it's really hard for me when I see it in places that are supposed to be safe, like schools, schools talking about like, let's go on a weight loss program together and lose weight. Or schools teaching kids about nutrition. Like kids don't need to learn about that stuff. That's not what they should be thinking about. Or doctors' offices, talking about kids needing to lose weight. Places where they're supposed to feel safe, they don't always. So we want to give them those tools to know, like, I'm here for you and I support you, and we can make a difference, even in our own family. That's important and that matters. I think that's such an empowering message for a kid.
Yeah, it really is. And we never know. Some of our kids, look at your daughter. She's going out, spreading the message.
Yeah,
It's wonderful. It's really
yeah,
wonderful. So,
yeah,
we might feel so small in our home. And yet, if we all felt that way and just did nothing about it, then we'd never change anything, right? But if we all realize the impact that every child will also send the message to the environment they're going to, and a really big impact that we have on our environment. Yeah, I love that.
yeah,
Do you want
yeah,
to look at questions? Let's see if we have any questions here.
yeah. And then I have some book recommendations I definitely want to share also. You can pick.
Let's see. How do you balance giving the compliment, but at the same time teaching it's not important? Giving the compliment, like when I guess we were saying, you're so cute, you're so, yeah.
Because you pair it with other things. Again, if that's not the only thing you talk about, like if the emphasis is more on what they do and less on how they look, then they won't think that's so important. So again, like you don't want to be like, you're so beautiful, but that's really not important. You don't want to do that. You don't want to water down the compliment. Like your hair looks beautiful, you look so cute. Like again, they should know that. They should feel like they're a beautiful person on the outside too. But again, you want the majority of the compliment to be, you're so thoughtful, I love when you're around. You're so funny. You clean up so beautifully. You're so helpful. You're so, I love how you run to help me with the groceries the minute I come home. It's amazing. You're so responsible. You're so patient with your sister. We want those things because again, those I always say, like, it's not going to say how cute and pretty you were on your tombstone. It's going to say what kind of person you were, loving mother, sister, friend, whatever. Like those are the qualities that people remember about you, who you were, not what you looked like. So you can have that balance of course they're adorable and beautiful and delicious, but they're really, who are they as a person? Because that's just one tiny aspect of them, their physical features.
And
So
I also feel like sometimes some parents will be like, you are the prettiest, kind
right,
of making it like a comparison to others, which is really, there's no use for that, right? And just focusing on our daughter, not making it like a competition, really.
yeah,
There will be a competition outside of our home, right? Everybody's looking, and especially in high school and many different places.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. If you say, wow, you're so tall, wouldn't that make my small daughter feel self-conscious and feel tall is ideal? I,
Did you want to say something?
no, go ahead. You can answer them.
I mean, so like, I guess we could say that about anything. Like, we can't like not compliment our kids because the other kid is going to feel bad. Like, it's not about that. Like, we're not, if I compliment you, I'm not putting down someone else. So if I'm noticing that my one kid is super talented as a dancer, it doesn't mean like, well, you're a stinky dancer. It just means I'm noticing something wonderful that I want to. And you also want to create in your home like an environment where it's not always a comparison. It's not like, oh my gosh, I love how you painted that. And then your kid's like, what about me? Like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, everyone has their time to shine. And if I'm complimenting your sister, I'm not putting you down. So I understand that might be, a kind of like something that goes on in a home. But then I would say, like, maybe you want to talk to your kid about that if they feel like if you compliment one, that you're like, not that you're saying something negative about them. I can say like, I love your page, Sterna. Does that mean that I don't love someone else's page? Like, no, I see that there's so much value and I enjoy so much of your content and I love lots of other pages too. So we can compliment and not worry that our other kids are feeling bad about themselves. Again, we don't want it to be a comparison. You're the smartest one in the family. Like, don't say that. you know? Um,
Yeah. So there's 1 minute left to the live, and I want to end it off properly and not just cut it off. So I guess we'll just end with those questions. You wanted to share
yes, books.
a book, yeah. So I actually did share on my page the division that you were telling me by Evelyn.
Yeah, Division of Responsibility by Ellen Satter.
Also the book that book.
Okay.
Reading.
Yes, Intuitive Eating,
Amazing.
it's
Amazing.
the Bible.
Yeah.
I love this book, a kid's book about body image, really good for little kids, like from
Love that.
3 years old